December 1992. Pablo Escobar sat in a freezing mountain hideout, watching his 7-year-old daughter Manuela, shivering uncontrollably, her lips turning blue, her small body convulsing from hypothermia. They had no heat, no blankets thick enough, no way to start a fire without giving away their position to the Colombian military hunting them. So Pablo did something that would become one of the most famous stories in criminal history. He started burning money. Stacks of $100 bills, bundles of cash wrapped in plastic. Over $2 million turned to ash that night just to keep his daughter alive. But that's not the story. That's just what everyone knows. What Manuela revealed decades later, what Pablo whispered to her while the money burned, is what will haunt you. Because the cash wasn't the only thing dying in that. And the warmth wasn't the only thing Pablo was desperately trying to give his daughter before it was too. The story begins 3 weeks earlier, in late November 1992, when Pablo Escobar made the decision that would lead to that freezing mountain night. He escaped from La Catedral, the luxury prison he'd built for himself, after the Colombian government tried to transfer him to a real prison. Pablo knew exactly what that meant. Extradition to the United States. Life in an American supermax prison. Solitary confinement. Never seeing his family again except through bulletproof glass during supervised visits. So he ran. But this time was different from all his previous escapes over the years. This time, he made a choice that would prove fatal. This time, he took his family with him. Maria Victoria, his wife of 17 years. Juan Pablo, his 15-year-old son who was starting to understand the truth about his father. And Manuela, his 7-year-old daughter, the light of his life, the one person in the world who still looked at him without fear or judgment, who still believed with absolute certainty that her father was a good man who helped people. The decision to bring his family was both an act of love and a strategic mistake. Pablo couldn't bear the thought of being separated from, couldn't stand the idea of Manuela growing up without him, forgetting his face, learning to hate him from news reports and history books. He wanted every moment he had left with her, every day, every hour, even if it meant putting her in danger, even if it meant dragging a 7-year-old child into a life on the run from the most powerful military and intelligence forces. So they fled together, a family of 4 against an entire nation. They moved constantly, desperately, safe house to safe house, never staying more than 2 nights in the same location because Pablo's network of informants kept reporting that the military was getting closer, that someone had talked, that their position was compromised. The Colombian government had mobilized thousands of soldiers specifically to hunt Pablo Escobar. The search block, an elite unit trained by American Special Forces, operated around the clock. The DEA had agents embedded throughout Medellin, paying informants, tracking phone calls, following every lead. And Los Peeps, a vigilante group funded by Pablo's enemies in the Cali cartel and supported quietly by elements within the government, were hunting him with a brutality that matched his own. They'd already killed dozens of his associates, tortured them for information before executing them, burned his properties to the ground, murdered his lawyers in their offices, bombed his safe houses. The net was closing from every direction. Pablo knew it, could feel it tightening around him like a noose. Maria Victoria knew it too. She'd stopped sleeping, spent every night listening for helicopters, for footsteps, for the sound of soldiers breaking down doors. Even Juan Pablo, at 15, understood with terrible clarity that they were living on borrowed time, that his father's empire had collapsed, that they were no longer the hunters but the hunted. But Manuela, at 7 years old, thought it was an adventure, a game. She didn't understand why they kept moving to new houses, why her father looked so tired and thin, his face gaunt and age beyond his 43 years. Why her mother cried silently when she thought no one was watching. Manuela just knew they were together, all 4 of them, and in her child's mind, that was enough. As long as her family was together, everything would be okay. Her father would protect them. He always did. By early December, they'd run out of safe houses in Medellin. Too dangerous. Too many informants. Too many people willing to sell Pablo's location for the $1 million reward the government had posted. Every street corner had eyes. Every neighbor was a potential traitor. Every phone call could be traced. So Pablo made the decision to leave the city entirely and go to the mountains. The same mountains where he'd hidden cocaine processing labs in the 1980s, where he knew every trail and cave, where the terrain was so rugged that even military helicopters had difficulty landing. Remote, isolated, difficult to access without local knowledge, but also freezing cold at night, especially in December when temperatures at high altitude dropped well below freezing, when the wind cut through clothing like knives, when hypothermia could kill you in hours if you weren't prepared. They found an abandoned shepherd's hut on the third day of searching. A structure that had been empty for years, maybe decades. Barely standing, stone walls crumbling in places. Holes in the thatched roof that let in rain and wind. No electricity, obviously. No running water. No heat source except a small stone fireplace in the corner that Pablo absolutely could not use because the smoke would give away their position immediately. Military helicopters flew overhead constantly, every few hours, equipped with thermal imaging cameras that could detect heat signatures from miles away. One fire, one plume of smoke rising from the mountains, and they'd be found within hours. Search block soldiers would surround the hut. There would be no escape, no negotiation, just bullets and death. The first 2 nights in the hut were manageable, though barely. They had blankets they brought from the last safe house, thick coats, sleeping bags. They huddled together for warmth in the corner farthest from the holes in the roof, their bodies pressed close, sharing heat. Pablo held Manuela close, telling her stories to distract her from the cold and the fear, making up adventures about brave princesses who lived in mountain castles, about magical kingdoms where it was always warm and safe. Manuela would fall asleep listening to his voice, her small body curled against his chest, trusting completely that her father would keep her safe. And for those first 2 nights, he did. The cold was uncomfortable, but survivable. They made it through. But on the third night, everything changed. A cold front moved through the mountains. The kind of weather system that kills unprepared hikers. The kind that doesn't care how many blankets you have or how tightly you huddle together. The temperature dropped dramatically, plummeting from merely cold to genuinely life-threatening. The wind picked up, howling through the holes in the roof, turning the hut into a wind tunnel. And Manuela, small and thin, her 7-year-old body, not built to withstand this kind of extreme cold, started showing signs of serious hypothermia. Maria Victoria wrapped every blanket they had around Manuela. It wasn't enough. Juan Pablo gave his daughter his coat. Still not enough. Pablo held her against his chest, trying to transfer his body heat to her small, freezing frame. But he could feel her getting colder, could feel her body temperature dropping, could see the signs of hypothermia setting in. Confusion, slurred speech, drowsiness. Manuela kept saying she wanted to sleep, and Pablo knew, with absolute certainty, that if she fell asleep in this cold, she might never wake up. That's when Pablo looked at the duffel bags stacked in the corner of the hut. 4 bags, each one filled with cash, American dollars, Colombian pesos, the emergency money he grabbed when they fled. Approximately $2.5 million in total. Money he'd planned to use to bribe officials, to pay for new identities, to fund their escape to a country without extradition. Money that represented survival, future, hope. And Pablo realized that none of that mattered if Manuela died tonight. He grabbed the first bundle of cash, $100 bills wrapped in plastic, ripped off the plastic, started tearing the bills into smaller pieces to make them burn longer. Maria Victoria stared at him in shock. Juan Pablo asked what he was doing. Pablo didn't answer. He just kept tearing, kept preparing. Then he walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and set the money on fire. The bills caught quickly, burned bright. The flames were small at first, but as Pablo added more cash, more torn pieces of $100 bills, the fire grew. Heat radiated from the fireplace. Real heat, life-saving heat. Pablo carried Manuela closer to the flame, held her in front of the burning money, watched the color slowly return to her lips, felt her shivering start to decrease, heard her breathing become more regular. She was warming up. The money was working, but money burns fast, faster than wood. A $100 bill burns in about 30 seconds. So Pablo had to keep feeding the fire, bundle after bundle, stack after stack. He burned $5,000, then $10,000, then $50,000. The numbers stopped meaning anything. It was just fuel, just a way to keep his daughter alive. Maria Victoria sat in the corner, crying silently, watching their future turn to ash. Juan Pablo helped his father, tearing bills, feeding the fire, understanding without being told that this was necessary. That Manuela's life was worth more than any amount of money. Hours passed. The night stretched endlessly. Pablo burned through the first duffel bag completely. Every single bill reduced to ash and smoke. Started on the second bag without hesitation. The fire kept going, kept burning, kept producing the heat that was literally keeping Manuela alive. And slowly, gradually, she stopped shivering entirely. Her body relaxed. The violent convulsions ceased. She started talking normally again, her words no longer slurred by hypothermia. Her color returned fully. Even smiled, that innocent 7-year-old smile, when Pablo made a joke about being the only man in history to use money as firewood. to heat his home with $100 bills instead of logs. She didn't understand what was happening, didn't comprehend the magnitude of what her father was doing, didn't realize that her father was burning their escape fund, their safety net, their future, their only chance at survival after. She just knew she was warm now. The terrible cold that had been killing her was gone, and her father was there, holding her, protecting her, making everything okay. And everything would be okay because her father always made everything okay. He always had. He always would. That's what she believed with the absolute certainty that only a 7-year-old child can have. But Pablo understood. Sitting there, feeding million-dollar bundles into the flames, he understood exactly what he was doing. He was burning his options, burning his backup plans, burning the resources he needed to protect his family long-term. And he didn't care, because in that moment, the only thing that mattered was the next hour, the next 30 minutes, the next moment. Keeping Manuela alive right now. Tomorrow's problems could wait. Tomorrow's survival could wait. Right now, his daughter needed heat, and he had money, and money burns, so he burned it. Around 3 in the morning, Manuela fell asleep. Not the dangerous, hypothermic sleep from earlier. Real sleep. Peaceful sleep. Her body temperature normal. Her breathing steady. Safe. Pablo kept the fire going for another hour, making sure she stayed warm, making sure the cold wouldn't come back. Then, when he was certain she was okay, he let the fire die down, looked at the remaining cash. He'd burned through approximately $2 million. $2 million in 6 hours. The most expensive heating bill in history. Maria Victoria finally spoke. Asked Pablo what they were going to do now, how they would survive without that money, how they would escape. Pablo didn't have an answer. He just looked at Manuela, sleeping peacefully, alive, and said, "We'll figure it out. As long as she's alive, we'll figure it out." But here's what most people don't know about that night. Here's what Manuela revealed in interviews decades later, after her father's death, after she'd grown up and processed the trauma of those years. The burning money wasn't just about heat. It was about something deeper, something Pablo said to her while the cash burned, something she didn't understand as a 7-year-old, but understood perfectly as an adult. While the money burned, while Manuela sat in front of the flames warming her small hands, Pablo held her close and whispered something he needed her to hear, even if she couldn't fully understand it yet. "Manuela, I want you to remember something important. All of this money, all of this cash, everything I built over all these years, it's all worthless. Completely worthless. It can't protect you from the cold. It can't keep you safe from danger. It can't even keep you warm on a freezing night. The only thing that matters, the only thing that has ever mattered, is that you're alive, that you're here with me, that I can hold you. Everything else is just paper, just ash, just nothing." Manuela, 7 years old, didn't fully understand the weight of what her father was saying. She just nodded and said, "Okay, Papa," in that simple way children respond to things beyond their comprehension. But Pablo kept talking, like he needed to say it out loud, like he needed her to hear these words, even if she couldn't comprehend them yet, even if it would take her decades to understand what he... "I built an empire, Manuela. I became the richest criminal in the world. I had billions of dollars. Billions. More money than most people can even imagine. And none of it matters. None of it protected the people I love. None of it kept you safe tonight. I'm burning $2 million right now, right here in front of you, just to keep you warm for one night. Just one night. And you know what? It's the best money I ever spent. The best investment I ever made. Because you're worth more than all of it. You're worth more than everything I ever built. More than all the money. More than all the power. More than the entire empire." He paused, watching another bundle of cash turn to flames, the $100 bills curling and blackening and disappearing into smoke. Then he said something that Manuela would remember for the rest of her life, something that would echo in her mind for decades. "When I'm gone, when all of this is over, when you're older and you understand what your father really was, I want you to remember this night. I want you to remember that your father loved you more than money, more than power, more than his own life. I want you to remember that I would burn everything I ever built, every dollar I ever made, just to keep you warm for one more night, just to keep you alive, just to hold you a little longer." Manuela didn't know it then, but Pablo was saying goodbye. He knew he wouldn't survive much longer, knew the military was closing in, knew that his time was measured in days, maybe weeks, not months or years. And he wanted his daughter to have one memory, one moment, where she understood that despite everything he'd done, despite all the violence and horror and death he'd caused, he loved her. Completely. Unconditionally. More than anything else in the world. 14 days later, on December 2nd, 1993, Pablo Escobar was shot and killed on a rooftop in Medellin. Manuela was 8 years old. She'd spent her last night with her father watching him burn $2 million to keep her alive. That became her final memory of him. Not the drug lord, not the terrorist, not the man responsible for thousands of deaths. Just her father, burning money to keep her warm, whispering that she was worth more than everything he'd ever built. Years later, as an adult living under a different name in a different country, Manuela changed her identity completely, left Colombia forever, tried desperately to build a life separate from her father's legacy, separate from the weight of being Pablo Escobar's daughter. She's given very few interviews over the decades, rarely speaks about her childhood to anyone, avoids journalists, avoids attention, avoids anything that might connect her back to that name, that history, that blood-soaked legacy. But when she does talk about that night in the mountains, about watching her father burn $2 million while she sat freezing in front of the flames, she says the same thing every single time, with the same quiet intensity. People think that story is about the money, about how crazy it is, how insane it is, that someone would burn $2 million. But it's not about the money at all. It never was. It's about what my father was trying to tell me that night. That love is worth more than wealth. That family is worth more than power. That keeping someone alive, keeping someone you love safe and warm and breathing, is worth any price, any sacrifice. He burned his empire that night, burned his future, burned his escape plan, and he did it without hesitation, without a second thought, because I was cold, because I needed him, because I was his daughter. That's what I remember when I think about that night. Not the money burning, not the flames, just that he chose me over everything else, over his freedom, over his survival, over everything. But there's a darker truth beneath that memory, a truth that Manuela also acknowledges. Pablo burned $2 million to save his daughter that night. But how many other daughters died because of the money he made? How many other children lost their fathers because of Pablo's empire? How many families were destroyed? How many lives were ruined? How many people died so that Pablo could accumulate the wealth he burned that night? The money that kept Manuela alive was earned through cocaine that destroyed American families, through violence that orphaned Colombian children, through a drug war that killed thousands. So yes, Pablo loved his daughter enough to burn $2 million. But he also loved money and power enough to kill thousands of people. That's the impossible contradiction at the heart of Pablo Escobar. The same man who burned $2 million to keep his daughter warm was the same man who ordered the bombing of Avianca Flight 203, killing 107 innocent people. The same man who whispered to Manuela that she was worth more than his entire empire was the same man who built that empire on corpses and cocaine. Both things are true. Both exist simultaneously. And Manuela has to live with both truths, has to live with the memory of a father who loved her unconditionally and the knowledge that her father was also a monster who destroyed countless lives. Today, Manuela Escobar lives in Argentina under a different name. She's in her late 30s. She suffers from severe depression and hearing loss in one ear, the result of a car bomb that exploded near her when she was a child. She rarely leaves her home, rarely speaks to anyone outside her immediate family. The trauma of her childhood, of being Pablo Escobar's daughter, of watching her father burn money to keep her alive, and then watching him die 2 weeks later, has marked her permanently. She spent her entire adult life trying to escape her father's shadow, trying to be someone other than the daughter of the world's most notorious drug lord. But she carries that night with her. The night her father burned $2 million. The night he told her she was worth more than everything. The night he chose her over his empire. It's her most precious memory and her deepest wound, because it showed her who her father could have been if he'd made different choices. If he'd valued human life the way he valued her life. If he'd loved the world the way he loved his daughter. But he didn't. He loved Manuela, and he destroyed everyone else. That's the real story of the night Pablo Escobar burned $2 million. It's not about the money. It's about a father's love and a father's sins existing in the same moment. It's about the fact that monsters can love their children while destroying other people's children. It's about the impossible truth that Pablo Escobar was both the best father Manuela could have asked for and the worst father anyone could have. Both. Always both. Forever both. And Manuela lives with that contradiction every single day. Lives with the warmth of that burning money and the cold reality of how her father earned it. Lives with the memory of his love and the knowledge of his crimes. Lives with the man who saved her life and the man who destroyed thousands of others. That's her burden. That's her truth. That's what haunts her. Not the money that burned, but the love that came with it and the horror that made it possible.